Hey! I'm Mr. O, here with another
Oh, wow!
moment at the Children's Museum of Houston. Most of us have seen a cartoon or a movie where anything from an anvil to an entire house is lifted off the ground simply by using a helium balloon. In fact, there have even been some real-life hoaxes around these. So how much can a balloon actually lift off the ground, and how many would it take to lift, say, an 8-year-old? Well, our insurance doesn't allow us to lift real 8-year-olds off the ground, so we're gonna have to figure out a different way to do it.
Did you know that?
Before we do the experiment, we first need to understand why helium balloons float. It has to do with buoyancy. Buoyancy is the force that fluids exert upward on objects. In other words, it pushes against gravity, which we measure by weight. So, if the weight is less than that of the buoyant force, an object will float. But if the weight is greater than the buoyant force, the object will sink. So a major predictor about whether or not something's going to float is its density. Density is how much stuff is packed inside an object. For example, this piece of wood doesn't have a whole lot of stuff packed in it. It's not very dense. In fact, it's less dense than water. So when I drop it into the water, it floats. But something with a whole lot of stuff packed in it, like this piece of metal, is very dense. In fact, it's more dense than water, so when I drop it in, it sinks. So what does this have to do with balloons? Well, liquids like water and gases like air are both fluids, so they both have buoyant forces. In other words, there are buoyant forces pushing up against objects in air. So when you have things like balloons that are made of carbon dioxide, which are more dense, they're gonna sink. But balloons filled with gases like helium, which are less dense, will float.
Warning.
Warning.
Warning. Warning.
Science is fun and you can learn a lot doing science, but it can be messy and sometimes a little dangerous, so always make sure you have a responsible adult working with you. It's time to figure this out. How much can a balloon actually lift? I've got two great assistants back here. I got London and Angelica, and they're gonna help us figure this out. First, we need to figure out how much weight one balloon can lift. We have here 20 balloons, each about the same size, more or less. The kids are gonna use paper clips to see how much weight each balloon can lift off the ground. We use the first paper clip to make a hook, and then hang the other clips onto the hook until the balloon can just barely lift off the ground. We've now collected all the paper clips from the balloons, and we're gonna weigh them. From this, we can figure out how much weight each balloon can lift on average, and how many balloons it would take to lift 1 pound.
It's 113 grams divided by 20 balloons
equals 5.65 grams per balloon.
By the way, 5.65 grams is about 0.2 ounces, or about 1/5 of an ounce.
So 1 pound, that's 16 ounces, divided by 0.2 ounces per balloon.
equals 80 balloons.
Now that we have our estimate, let's figure out how close they really are.
It took 80 balloons.
80 balloons just for 1 pound.
Gosh. Yeah.
1 pound.
So it took 80 balloons to lift this 1 pound off the ground. Well, that means that your average 8-year-old who weighs about 57 pounds, it would take around 4,560 balloons, or around 12 large tanks of helium. And to me, that's not a very good use of your time, your money, and most importantly, 8-year-olds. So today we learned about buoyancy and its effect on gases, we learned how density can be predicted about whether things will sink or float, and we learned just how many balloons it took to lift 1 pound, from which we know how much it would take to lift, say, your average person. We hope you've had an uplifting experience and have been inspired to go have an oh wow moment of your own. And please, don't try to fly using helium balloons.